There's a moment that catches every man off guard. One day, you feel it, the connection. The laughs are deeper, the eye contact lingers longer, her messages come faster. It finally feels like things are going somewhere. You're not guessing anymore. You're not overanalyzing. She's into you. Then, almost without warning, something shifts. She becomes distant. Her replies are short. Her energy feels different. You sense hesitation, but you don't know why. Was it something you said? Something you didn't do? She's pulling back, but the timing couldn't be more confusing. Everything felt right, just yesterday. And that's exactly the moment most men fall into the trap. You start reaching more, texting more, trying to bring back the warmth that seemed to vanish overnight. But the harder you try, the colder she becomes. What was once connection turns into confusion. Doubt creeps in. Insecurity grows. But here's the truth no one teaches. The moment she begins to feel something real is often the moment she backs away, not because she doesn't want you, but because emotions for many women are a risk, a loss of control, a threat to the safety they've built around themselves. And if you don't understand what's really happening beneath that shift, if you react emotionally instead of standing firm, you don't just lose your composure, you lose her. This video is your clarity. Because once you understand what's behind her sudden change, you won't need to panic. You won't need to chase. You'll stand steady in the storm and become the kind of man she never forgets. If you're tired of second guessing and ready to understand women through the lens of strength and emotional control, you're in the right place. Welcome to Stoic Advice for Men. Subscribe now and master the power of not being shaken. In today's world, many women wear independence like armor. They've been told to trust no one, to rely on nothing but themselves, to guard their hearts with steel and never let a man get too close. Not because they want to be cold, but because warmth has betrayed them before. Vulnerability for them hasn't always led to love. It's often led to abandonment, manipulation, or regret. So they become sharp, self-contained, emotionally agile. And from the outside, they look unshakable, but something happens the moment real feelings begin to take shape. Not casual interest, not fleeting attraction, but that deep, uncontrollable pull, the kind that makes her think about you when she's alone, that lingers in the silence after your voice, that makes her start to imagine needing you. And that terrifies her. You see, when a woman starts falling for you, really falling, something inside her begins to shift. Her well-practiced emotional control starts slipping, little by little. And for a woman who's built her identity on not needing anyone, that loss of control doesn't feel like love at first. It feels like danger, because once she admits she wants you, she opens the door to being hurt by you. So what does she do? She pulls back. She creates distance. Not because she's lost interest, but because she's overwhelmed by it. You might notice a sudden change in tone. Less warmth in her texts, fewer calls, less effort. Sometimes even outright coldness. And if you don't understand what's happening, you'll think she's rejecting you. You'll take it personally. You'll chase. You'll ask questions. You'll try to fix what you think is broken. But here's the paradox. The more you chase in that moment, the more you confirm her fear. She starts to believe you were never as strong as you seemed. That you're just like the others, reactive, insecure, desperate for reassurance. And the very thing that made her feel safe with you, your centeredness now, feels threatened by your emotional volatility. This is where most men collapse. They think they're being romantic by proving how much they care, when in reality, they're unraveling the image of masculine stability she once admired. Because a man who cannot hold himself together in the face of uncertainty is not a man she can trust with her heart. So what do you do instead? You don't panic. You don't demand answers. You don't text her paragraphs trying to convince her to open up. You don't ask why she's distant, or what you did wrong, or how you can fix it. You simply take a step back, not out of pride, not as a tactic, but as a stoic response to emotional chaos. You give her the gift of space, not to disappear or punish, but to let her feel what she feels without pressure. You stop chasing and start observing. And most importantly, you hold your frame. Because what she's looking for, consciously or not, is whether you are strong enough to not be shaken. That's the test. That's the turning point. If you can stay grounded, composed, and non-reactive when she pulls back, if you can remain steady in the middle of emotional uncertainty, then something powerful happens. Her fear begins to lose its grip. She starts to sense that she's safe, not because you promised her safety, but because you embodied it. Your silence doesn't feel like neglect. It feels like confidence. Your distance doesn't read as retreat. It reads as respect. And slowly, without you forcing it, she comes back. She returns not because you begged for her presence, but because she felt free to choose it. And this time, when she chooses you, she chooses from trust, not from fear. Because the man who doesn't chase her confusion becomes the one she trusts with her clarity. This is stoic strength in the realm of love. No drama, no emotional games. Just calm leadership, quiet power, and unshakable presence. And if this is the kind of man you strive to become, if you're done reacting and ready to start leading, not just in dating, but in life, then this journey is for you. Subscribe to Stoic Advice for Men, because in a world full of noise, strength is silent, and sometimes the most attractive move is the one you don't make. She won't say it. She won't look you in the eye and tell you, "I'm testing to see what kind of man you are." But she is not with words, but with silence, with that sudden shift in tone, with a canceled plan she used to be excited about, with a cold reply that replaces her usual warmth, with a quiet retreat that leaves you wondering if the connection you felt was ever even real. And here's the part most men miss. This isn't random. It's deliberate. She's not just pulling away, she's watching. Not to play games, not to be cruel, but because somewhere deep inside, she's asking questions she doesn't know how to ask out loud. Can I trust him with my emotions? Will he stay grounded when things get unclear? Is he a man who leads or a boy who reacts? She wants to know what you're made of. Not in your best moments, but in your uncertain ones. Because any man can be charming when things are smooth. But when her energy shifts, when she stops texting first, when she delays responding, when she pulls her affection away ever so slightly, your response in those moments is the blueprint she uses to measure your strength. And if you fail the test, you won't even know it happened. You'll just feel her slipping away. Most men, without realizing it, crumble right here. They notice the change and they panic. They start sending multiple texts. Are you okay? Did I do something wrong? What happened to us? They try to fix, explain, recover, chase. And with every message, every attempt to pull her back, they lose another ounce of her respect. Because in her eyes, a man who falls apart when she pulls back is a man who cannot be trusted to lead when life gets harder. This is the moment she needs to see that you're built different. Not because you say so, but because you don't flinch. When she withdraws, you don't chase. When she gets cold, you don't beg for warmth. When she stops reaching out, you don't spiral into self-doubt. You live. You lead. You continue your path not out of pride or ego, but because your stability isn't dependent on her approval. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about being hard to unground. Your stillness in the face of her uncertainty communicates more than any declaration of loyalty. It tells her, I don't need to control you to feel confident. I know who I am, with or without your validation. And that is rare, because most men are emotional responders. They crave reassurance. They chase closure. They interpret distance as danger and rush in to fix what was never theirs to fix. But the man who passes her test is different. He doesn't argue. When she cancels, he doesn't guilt her. When she pulls away, he doesn't over-explain. When things feel off, he simply holds his ground, stays calm, and lets her see that his value doesn't waver based on her temporary confusion. And in doing so, he does something powerful. He reverses the test. Now she's the one asking questions. Why isn't he chasing me? Did I misread his interest? Why do I feel like I need to come back to him? Because the man who doesn't chase is the one she starts to chase. Not because you played a game, but because you passed hers. Showed her what true masculine composure looks like. You reminded her without words that you are not swayed by emotional turbulence, that your foundation is not built on her moods, but on your own self-control. And that, above all, is what makes a woman feel safe, because it's not about always saying the right things. It's about being the kind of man who doesn't fall apart when things get unclear. That kind of man doesn't need to prove anything. His presence says it all. So when she pulls back, when she tests, when she stirs the emotional waters just to see if you'll sink, don't flail. Don't chase. Don't plead. Stand still. Let her feel the calm. Let her watch you lead without force. Let her realize that strength, when silent, becomes irresistible. And if this is the kind of strength you want to cultivate, not just in love, but in every part of your life, then stay with us. Subscribe to Stoic, advice for men, where emotional discipline becomes your greatest power. Sometimes, what you're feeling isn't about you at all. Sometimes, her silence isn't rejection, and her coldness isn't disinterest, but a war she's silently fighting with a version of herself she thought she buried long ago. Because right when things begin to feel safe, right when you start showing her something real, something consistent, something that doesn't ask for performance or perfection, that's exactly when her past comes back to haunt her. Not with loud memories or visible scars, but with subtle tremors beneath the surface, an inner voice whispering, don't trust this, don't relax, don't believe it'll last. And so, she doesn't pull away from you. She pulls away from the feelings you've stirred inside her, the ones that feel eerily similar to what she once believed was love, before it unraveled and left her picking up the pieces. You may have done everything right. You've been consistent. You've been kind. You've shown up with clarity, with patience, with depth. And still, she She goes quiet, not because she doesn't feel something, but because she feels too much, too fast, too deeply, and the last time she let those emotions in, they tore her apart. So she starts acting strange. One day, she's warm, engaged, almost glowing in your presence, and the next, she's distant, short, distracted, like she's somewhere else entirely. You start wondering what changed. You replay your last few conversations, looking for something you might have said or missed. But the truth is, nothing changed on the surface. Everything changed beneath it. Because as her heart begins to open, her mind starts building walls. Not because she wants to ruin what's blooming between you, but because what's blooming looks a lot like the garden that once withered in her hands. And pain has a way of teaching people to flinch at even the gentlest touch. Here's where most men make the fatal mistake. They take her withdrawal personally. They assume it means disinterest. They try to fix it with more effort, more affection, more words. They become anxious, reactive, needy. But every time you try to fix her emotional retreat with logic or reassurance, you're not pulling her closer, you're confirming her fear. That strong emotions lead to instability. That closeness leads to pressure. That vulnerability still isn't safe. So what do you do as a man grounded in Stoic strength? You don't follow her into the spiral. You don't rush to explain. You don't demand she talk to you about it. You don't play therapist to her trauma. You simply give her space, not as punishment, not as manipulation, but as respect. You let her wrestle her own shadows while you remain present, steady, calm, not as a rescuer, but as a reference point of peace she can return to when the noise in her head quiets. You see, she's not afraid of you. She's afraid of losing herself again. And the more you try to convince her otherwise, the more she recoils. Because in her world, words were always the bait. Promises were always broken. "I'm not like the others" was said by too many who turned out to be worse. But your stillness, that's different. When you hold your frame not with arrogance, but with quiet knowing, she starts to realize that maybe this time, she isn't dealing with another man who will collapse when emotions rise. Maybe this time, she's met someone who doesn't flinch at her wounds. And when that realization begins to set in, when she sees that you don't react, don't chase, don't shrink or explode, she begins to believe something her past tried to kill inside her. That love can feel safe again. This is not about healing her. That's not your job. This is about not making her pain about you. You're not here to fix her history. You're here to write your own dot, so when she fades, when she becomes cold, when she retreats just as things get real, don't try to pull her back into the light. Become the light. Stay where you are, solid, centered, steady. And when she's ready, when she's brave enough to try again, she return, not to the man who chased her through the fog, but to the one who never left himself while she wandered. Because the Stoic man does not panic in the face of someone else's pain. He does not carry wounds that are not his to bear. He simply lives with enough clarity and calmness to become proof that not all men run when it gets hard. And if she's the kind of woman who's worth your time, she recognizes that strength and come back, not because she's afraid of being alone, but because she knows this time she doesn't have to be. If this speaks to something you've experienced, stay the course. This isn't just dating advice. It's how you reclaim control in a world full of emotional chaos. Subscribe to Stoic, advice for men, because when she's fighting her past, your stillness becomes her future. There comes a moment in every budding connection when the energy shifts, not dramatically, not with a fight, not with any words at all, but with silence. The kind of silence that doesn't announce itself but lingers in unanswered texts, delayed responses, canceled plans, and that subtle pullback you feel in your gut before your mind even knows what's happening. God, it's in that silence that the test begins, because while she may not say it out loud, while she may not even admit it to herself, what she's doing is creating space. Not out of boredom, not out of cruelty, but to see how you will respond when the ground beneath you becomes uncertain. This isn't about games, though to the untrained eye, it may look like it. This is about clarity. She wants to know if the strength you showed when things were easy still holds when things become ambiguous. And so, she pulls away, not entirely, just enough for you to notice, and waits. Not for your apology, not for your chase, but for your reaction. Because in that space, she's not only observing what you do, she's measuring who you are. Will you panic? Will you reach, text, call, double message, ask her what's wrong? Try to fill the silence with explanations or romantic declarations that were never asked for? Or will you remain centered? Will you keep walking with your purpose, unshaken, unmoved, not because you don't care, but because you refuse to cling to what does not clearly choose you? Here's the paradox most men don't see until it's too late. The moment you start chasing, you stop leading. The moment you abandon your calm to pursue her comfort, you've surrendered the frame. And while it may feel like you're proving your commitment, what she sees is a man who is emotionally dependent, unstable, needing to close a gap that only she created. That kills attraction. Not because she dislikes attention, but because what she truly desires is to feel the gravity of your presence, not the weight of your desperation. So what does the Stoic man do when she pulls away? He lets her. He doesn't chase. He doesn't punish. He doesn't post stories to get her attention, nor does he disappear to make her miss him. He simply continues being the man he was before she tested him, because that consistency, that emotional stillness, that lack of neediness, it speaks louder than any romantic words ever could. It says, I don't need to convince you. I don't need to prove myself. I am already what I am, and if you don't see it, that's not my crisis to solve. And it's in that silence, real silence, not coldness or withdrawal, but grounded, masculine stillness, that she feels the contrast between a man who needs validation and a man who carries value. Because chasing communicates one thing: you're afraid to lose her. But stillness says, I know who I am. I won't fight to be seen. And that message, it's irresistible. Because the truth is, women are drawn not to the man who reacts emotionally, but to the man who makes her feel something in the quiet. When you do not chase, you shift the emotional weight. Suddenly, she's not wondering if she's desired, she's wondering if she lost something desirable. She starts to feel the void, not because you created it on purpose, but because you didn't rush to fill the one she created. She starts to question her pullback. Did I misread him? Why isn't he chasing? Why does his calm bother me more than any pleading ever could? And that is when attraction deepens, not in the noise, but in the silence. So no, you don't need to chase. You don't need to initiate out of fear. You don't need to play a role to win her attention back. You need to remain in your truth. Because the man who stands still when she retreats becomes the man she respects when she returns. Not because you controlled her, but because you never let her control you. This is what Stoic strength looks like in relationships. No games, no manipulation, just quiet power and unwavering posture. If she comes back to the man who never left himself to go find her. And if she doesn't, she was never meant for a man like you in the first place. There comes a moment in every growing connection where something unexpected happens. Not a fight, not a betrayal, not even a misunderstanding, but a quiet, almost invisible shift in energy that feels like cold air entering a warm room. A subtle retreat behind walls you didn't even know existed. And in that moment, most men feel confused because nothing seems wrong on the surface. Yet something underneath has undeniably changed. She begins to pull away, not with anger or rejection, but with silence, with slower replies, with shorter conversations, with less softness in her tone, and more distance in her gaze. And what makes it more confusing is that this usually happens after you've already built something real, after the laughs have been shared, after the comfort has deepened, after the kind of intimacy has emerged that can only come from emotional safety. And that is precisely when her fear begins to speak louder than her desire. Because the closer you get to seeing the real, her, not the curated image, not the charming surface, not the version she shows the world, but the raw, unfiltered, imperfect woman underneath, the more terrifying the possibility becomes that you might not like what you find. It's not that she thinks you're unworthy of her, but rather that she quietly believes she may not be worthy of you once you see past the surface. For so many women, the world has not been kind to their authenticity. They've been told they were too emotional, too intense, too needy, too complicated. So they learn to hide the parts of themselves that drew criticism, shame, or abandonment. And when you, a man of calm presence and emotional strength, start reaching closer, not just physically but psychologically, spiritually, soulfully, it triggers every unhealed wound that told her, if he sees the whole of me, he'll leave too. That's why she withdraws, not out of malice or manipulation, but out of self-preservation. Because in her experience, closeness has often led to collapse, and she would rather step back now, while she still feels some control, than risk the heartbreak of you stepping back later once you've seen her most unguarded self. And this is where many well-intentioned men make the fatal mistake, not because they mean harm, but because they respond from anxiety rather than wisdom, from emotion rather than principle. They feel the distance, and out of care, they rush to close it. They begin to over-explain, over-promise, overcompensate. They say things like, "You can trust me," or "I would never hurt you," or "I'm not like the others," not realizing that these words, no matter how sincere, often sound exactly like the words of the ones who once broke her. But a Stoic man does not reach for reassurance through words. He embodies it through presence. He does not scramble to pull her back when she hesitates. He stands still, not with arrogance, but with deep-rooted steadiness that says, "I'm not going anywhere, but I don't chase confusion either." Because the truth is, when a woman fears you'll see the real her, she doesn't need your promises, your pleading, or your poetic reassurances. What she needs is to watch you remain emotionally unshaken, even as she begins to tremble. She needs To see that your interest is not a performance for good behavior, that your respect does not disappear when she becomes inconsistent, that your patience is not a strategy but a standard you live by. She needs to feel that you are not here to fix her, save her, or decode her, but that you are here, whole in yourself, whether or not she is ready to be whole beside you. And when you refuse to chase the part of her that is afraid, when you allow her the dignity of her own process, without panic or persuasion, she begins to sense something foreign, something rare, something powerful. She begins to feel safe, not because you promised her safety, but because you didn't demand anything from her in exchange for your stillness. And that is when the walls begin to come down. Because emotional safety isn't built through declarations, it's built through quiet proof. And when she sees that her worst fears, that being truly seen means being ultimately abandoned, don't come true with you, something inside her begins to shift. The fear loses power. The hiding becomes unnecessary. The real her starts to emerge, not because she was pushed or pulled or promised, but because she chose to show you what she no longer needed to hide. And you, by standing still, by not flinching, by being the one person who didn't react to her retreat with panic, you become the first man who proved that her full self was never too much. If you've ever watched a woman retreat when things were finally going right, know this: her fear wasn't of you, but of what loving you might reveal inside herself. Subscribe to Stoic Advice for Men, where we learn to lead with silence, hold steady through storms, and become the kind of man she doesn't need to hide from. Sometimes the greatest threat to a woman's heart isn't your flaws, your mistakes, or even your distance. It's your strength. Not the kind of strength that dominates or intimidates, but the quiet, grounded presence of a man who is centered in himself, who knows who he is, who doesn't waver when emotions rise or situations shift, and who leads not through control, but through unwavering clarity. For a woman who has spent most of her life dealing with men who are inconsistent, reactive, or emotionally unstable, meeting a man like you, a man who listens without judgment, speaks with intention, lives with purpose, and does not need her validation to stand tall, can be both magnetic and deeply unsettling. Because while she may crave stability, may long for honesty, may dream of a man who truly sees her, the moment she receives what she says she wants, the fear of not being worthy of it creeps in like a shadow beneath the warmth. She begins to question not you, but herself, not because you've done anything wrong, but because the level of emotional safety you offer feels unfamiliar. And anything unfamiliar, no matter how healthy, can feel threatening to someone who has only known conditional love and temporary affection. And so, she begins to sabotage, not always consciously, not always with intent to destroy, but with small acts of retreat. A passive-aggressive comment here, a fabricated argument there, an unexpected withdrawal masked as busyness or emotional fatigue. You may begin to sense it in her hesitation, in her resistance to compliments, in her inability to receive your love without deflecting or downplaying it. It's not because she doesn't want it, it's because deep down, a voice inside her whispers that she doesn't deserve it. And this is where the Stoic man is tested, not in how he chases, fixes, or reassures, but in how he holds his frame without collapsing into the temptation to shrink himself in order to make her feel comfortable. Because many men, out of love or compassion, begin to dim their light. They downplay their success. They soften their standards. They begin to prove themselves to her fears, instead of standing as an invitation for her to rise. But you, as a man of grounded principle, must never lower yourself to soothe another's insecurity. You are not here to carry her worth. For her, you are here to reflect it back to her through your consistency, your calm, and your refusal to chase validation. And that means allowing her the space to confront her own doubts without bending your truth to make her stay. Because the man who tries to convince her that she deserves him often ends up losing himself in the process. But the man who stays rooted in his strength, who does not take her fear personally, who does not sacrifice his power to appease her anxiety, he becomes the mirror that forces her to choose, shrink or grow. And if she chooses to grow, it is not because you dragged her forward. It's because your presence made it undeniable. That staying behind meant losing something real. So the next time you sense a woman pulling away, not out of malice but out of unworthiness, remember, she doesn't need you to shrink. She needs you to stand. Subscribe to Stoic Advice for Men, where we don't chase, don't lower, don't beg. We rise and we let others meet us where we are. By the time she meets you, by the time your words begin to resonate, your presence begins to calm, and your consistency starts to feel like something she could lean into. She has likely already survived a gallery of disappointments, betrayals, half-hearted promises, and beautifully spoken lies, all delivered by men who once looked just as steady, sounded just as sincere, and touched her heart with just enough warmth to be dangerous. So when you offer her kindness, when you show her attention, when you begin to peel back her walls with quiet strength instead of force, what you may interpret as progress, she may secretly interpret as a warning. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because she's learned it through scars she never asked for. That words mean very little when they are not anchored by action. That comfort often precedes collapse, and that the moment she believes someone is different is usually the moment everything begins to fall apart. And so, she tests you, not to manipulate you, not to create unnecessary drama, not to punish your effort, but because she desperately needs to see if what you represent is something real or just another temporary illusion wearing a stable man's face. She doesn't ask, "Are you different?" with her lips, but she asks it with her patterns, with her distance, with her moments of resistance and silence and withdrawal that seem to come out of nowhere, yet are born from a lifetime of emotional defenses carefully crafted to protect her from the kind of pain that doesn't bleed on the outside. And in those moments when she pulls back, when she creates friction where there was peace, when she seems to be searching for reasons to doubt what she previously leaned into, you will be tempted to explain, to prove, to correct, to chase after the version of her that trusted you before. The fear returned. But a Stoic man does not argue with fear, nor does he try to reason with someone's trauma, because he knows that trust cannot be demanded, it must be observed. He does not attempt to convince her with new promises, louder affirmations, or emotional appeals, because he understands that every man before him said the same things, and the only thing that ever made a difference was what they did when things became unclear. So he does the one thing she has never seen last long enough to believe in. He stays consistent. He remains grounded. Not because he wants to impress her, but because he refuses to abandon his truth for someone else's moment of doubt. He does not chase the version of her that vanished. He welcomes whatever comes next without folding his integrity to pull it closer. And in that stillness, in that refusal to flinch, in that calm continuation of purpose and presence, he answers the question she was too scared to ask directly. Are you like the rest? Because any man can sound different in the beginning, but only a rare few remain different when tested, when doubted, when ignored, when misunderstood. And that difference is not found in how loud you love, how hard you try, or how quickly you respond. It's found in your capacity to stay emotionally regulated when her storm begins, in your ability to remain the mountain when she starts to shake, when she pulls away, when her warmth turns to silence, when her softness becomes guarded and her affection fades without explanation. It's easy to believe you've been rejected, that something you said or did turned her away, that you're suddenly no longer enough. But that belief is almost always a lie whispered by your own insecurity, not a reflection of her truth. Because the deeper reality is this: you are not being discarded. You are being observed, not through her compliments, not through her closeness, but through her distance, her doubt, her silence, and the quiet chaos she creates to see if your strength was real or only present when things were easy. She is not pushing you away, she is pushing against her own fear, her own memories, her own ghosts that rise whenever something good begins to feel real. And it is in those moments, not the ones filled with harmony, but the ones clouded by confusion, that the essence of a man is revealed. Because the men who chase, who plead, who try to fix her fear with promises and performance, who become reactive, insecure, or emotional when tested, they are the ones she's learned to let go of. But the man who stands still, the man who holds his posture, not with coldness but with calm, not with arrogance but with clarity, is the man she eventually returns to. Because women do not stay with the loudest voice or the most persuasive words. They stay with the man who doesn't collapse under pressure, the man who becomes the eye of the storm instead of the one who gets swept up in it. So, let her test. Let her retreat. Let her fear rise and fall without making it your responsibility to manage. Let her push. Let her run. Your power is in not being shaken. And if you're done chasing love, done proving your worth, done negotiating your value every time someone else becomes uncertain, then it's time to stop moving and start mastering the one thing most men never will. Subscribe to True Stoic Way, because sometimes the most powerful move is to stand still